Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. This is the Leadership Toolkit. I'm Mike. This, as you know, is your definitive leadership growth podcast. Each week, I have amazing people on from all different verticals of business, all different coaching disciplines, and we have candid conversations so that you have the opportunity to grow and not just affect your own growth, but affect the people around you. So, we talk to leaders and business people and managers and entrepreneurs and authors, and we just get their take on what it is to be a great leader and then what they've experienced in their successes, maybe some of their failures. So hopefully you can avoid that in your own business life. So today's no different. I have got an amazing guest on the show. He's a coach, a speaker, a podcast host. Most importantly, he helps people bust through burnout. He helps them get clear and build confidence, whether they're at the start of their career or maybe they need a little extra boost. So today I'm going to be bringing on my new friend, Samar Kargbo. And Samar, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Leadership Toolkit. Thanks so much for making time with me today, man.
Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for having me on. This is great.
Absolutely. So if you would, let's take a few minutes first off and just share sort of what's your background, what's your leadership journey, the 3 to 4 minute elevator pitch, and what do you do in leadership? Where did you get started in business? And then let's dive in from there, man.
All right. My central conceit of life, just so you know before I started, is I want to be a good boy. I want to do the right thing. So here in 3 to 4 minutes
All
gives
right.
me just the right parameters.
Hey, you can go longer than that. There's no rules,
right.
man, but just laying it out.
This is good. So I started out in leadership rooms. I was probably 16 years old. I had grown up in the church, and I was starting to get into acting, and someone in a skit team said, "We like your energy." And the next year, that following December, I was performing in front of 5,000 people.
Wow.
And that involved a lot of I'm good enough, I belong here. A lot of that self-talk. As we go, that sort of grew, us leading Bible studies and teachings and workshops and things like that. And as I grew, 3 years after that, 19, I was hired on in my first pastor position,
Okay.
which again, a lot of I belong here. This is a good thing. You're doing the right thing. Kind of talk to myself. But in that was my first time getting real official leadership training. But it didn't feel like enough. So I started getting some counseling training as I went, because people at 19, I mean, not everybody has the same situation, but for me, I came from a place where I didn't know anything about hard times. And I grew up in an upper middle
Right.
class home and those sorts of things. My life was pretty easy at that point, but people were coming to me with very serious, very deep problems. So I started talking to people about, okay, if this happens in your life, that's not okay. Let's go together and talk to someone that can handle this, like real legal issues and things like that. So I had to go get some counseling help. So
Gotcha.
I went
And you're
and got
19 at this time? I'm sorry to
19. Yeah.
interrupt. Okay,
No, you're
man,
fine.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm 19 and I went to, there was luckily my home church that I was not working at taught Liberty University's Christian counseling courses. So I took 2 or 3 of those, which included practicums and all that stuff that you do when you do counseling. And that sort of gave me a good basis. And a couple of years later, I actually moved. So I was in Buffalo, New York, where I'm
Mhm.
from. And then I moved because a friend of mine said, "Hey, I am having a really hard time with my youth group." And up in Buffalo, I had gotten my youth group humming without me. It was volunteer
Sure.
led. I came in just to teach. I would run, staff development type things, but essentially I'd worked myself out of a job. So I went ahead and left. And I said, I'll be gone 6 months. I'll come back. I, spoiler alert, many years later, I have not gone back. Uh, but I was a couple of years and the relationship soured. And I ended up leaving the clergy. But there were a few nuggets that I really wanted to take with me. So I kept the teaching, the public speaking, the
Hmm.
training, and the counseling, but I knew I couldn't necessarily enter the counseling space in the same manner. So I got into coaching and consulting. And as I did that kind of part of it, I learned that these people's problems that they're bringing to me are much more sort of like salt of the earth. Just like these are people problems and not spiritual problems. So I went and got another certification, John Maxwell trained now.
Love it.
That's with coaching, training, speaking, all that good stuff. Everybody just wants to train you to speak more, which
Right.
is fun. But as things went there, I sort of got into a sort of like blossomed into my own of fun kind of public speaking, workshop leading, and coaching. And that kind of leads me to where I am now, where I'm with my own coaching company where I get to help people with various things. One of my tentpole things is Burnout Now, because it has a lot to do with my life. I was at the end of my clergy journey in my nonprofit space, very burnt out, and it didn't take the amount of time to burn out. It took a series of steps. Once I learned that, I was able to kind of take that and help other people in their lives with the same kind of issue.
Gotcha. That's actually really phenomenal. I'm curious, a couple of questions that lead from that. And thank you for being so open and sharing your journey. It's funny as you're
Absolutely.
talking, because we were talking just briefly before, and I'm ahead of you in time, but I feel very much like kindred spirits as you're sharing some of your journey and the things that you've done. Because um, anyway, I think that's just one of those healthy things. When you connect
Yeah.
with somebody, it's like, oh man, that is great.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions. When did you leave the clergy? You said you kind of got burnt out and you left. What age frame was that for you?
I was 25,
Okay.
the end of my
So
25th year.
here's something that I think is just wild, at least for me, because most of the time when we hear burnout, when you hear burnout like from work or burnout from a thing, usually it's an activity that we're doing, right? It's something we're engaged in.
Mhm.
My picture is it's like the 40-year-old burnout, midlife crisis, the 50-year-old burnout, this guy, right? Midlife crisis, hopefully midlife crisis for me. So
Yeah.
when you're saying like, hey, listen, I experienced this now, you were super accelerated. You're like, hey, at 16, I'm in these rooms learning leadership. At 19, I'm counseling and coaching and leading. And then at 25, you're going, man, I'm burnt out. First off, how do you realize, like, what was the linchpin for you at 25 that you said, hey, I'm burnt out, I'm fried on this, I got to go somewhere else and do something else? Do you remember that?
I do, yes. I was, it was sort of, so we've all heard these days of the Sunday scaries. Well, I was getting mine on Saturday because on
Okay.
Sundays I was going in. So on Saturdays I started thinking, this is not what I want to do with my life. This is probably the worst thing I could be doing with my life right now. It's maybe unique to the nonprofit passion oriented work. Um, but I felt I was doing a disservice to the work itself by not
Wow.
passionately moving forward to it. And feeling those feelings really woke me up to maybe there's something wrong here. And I didn't at the time call it burnout. I just said that place stinks. Like that's not for me anymore. It took me a
Right.
long time to wake up to the reality that I just was giving I turned myself into a dynamo and I had nothing to push me forward to continue. So I was just winding down, nothing to grease the wheels. So I was slowing down and that metaphor could go many places, but um, it was something that was just grinding to a halt. And one day I just couldn't go anymore. And that was when I realized.
So it's one of those things, it sounds like some self-talk. You were showing up
Mhm.
more out of position and obligation than out of purpose anymore. Is that a fair?
Absolutely. Yes. And part of it was the way I chose to show up to work. In my first placement, I don't think I ever would have burned out. because I was well respected for my age. People were actively helping me stay there because they knew they were the first people to have brought me into the clergy, and they wanted to
Sure.
be good stewards of what they were bringing into the world. The second was getting a pastor already formed, and they were saying, we're not sure about this guy. And
Hmm.
instead of when I made a mistake, telling me, hey, we would prefer this way, or having an honest conversation with me, a lot of times it was, we're going to shun this guy until he does what we want.
Hmm.
And I showed up to work with, I'm going to give these people every bit of myself and hope they're worthy of that trust. I'm going to give them all my free time. I'm going to give them all of my energy and all of that. And that's a problem, right? Even in areas where you're well taken care of, you can't do that. You have to reserve some for you, for your self-care. And that was essentially, that was where the start of it was before I ever felt a problem.
Gotcha. So one of the things that you said as we were, chatting in the intro too, is you said, and I framed it with, well, hey, at burnout, you got the midlife crisis type of deal. And you, as you were talking, said you realized it was more a series of steps
Mhm.
versus the time. Because to me, I look at it and go, gosh, 5 years, that's a short time. And you're saying, yeah, but it was enough. And so that's sort of associated with, um, can you articulate the series of steps, or is it sort of just what you were saying? Like, hey, they were shunning me, I was getting this. So you're kind of getting beat on from different angles.
Yeah, sure. So the way I kind of look at it is more like 5 steps, I want to say.
Okay.
So the first step is when you're working too hard. You're working more on your job than you're working on yourself. I like to call
Oh,
that
that's good.
hustle because I believe that should have a bad connotation, the hustle culture
Interesting.
that we have. Um,
Okay.
then you have where it starts to kind of creep down. It's the slow leak, where you start to drop the balls that you were juggling all that time,
Okay.
and then you start to disconnect, and you're still doing some extra work, but mentally you've sort of started to check out, and you may not realize it unless you examine it, but you feel disconnected with the group or the job. Then we start to get into that deep draining portion of it, where you don't have the energy for the work, but you're still able to plod along, and do it. And an odd little quirk that I have at times like this, I know how to count in a number of languages, and
Okay.
I'll find myself starting to count. I'll count my steps. I'll count, whatever it is, things on my desk. I'll start to count so that I can feel time passing. Otherwise, it feels sort of like everything's gone to a point, and it's kind of feels hopeless in those moments, which is a form of depression, which often really sets in here. And then the fifth one I would call just the breaking point, where you just can't get out of bed for this job, or even people get burned out on relationships, whatever it is, you're not able to engage with it anymore. And then you have the full burnout, where you've exited whatever it was, the relationship with the person, work, whatever, and you're done. You wash your hands of it.
Got it. So I spend a lot of time sort of repeating what my
Sure.
guests say to make sure that I'm hearing and be
Yeah.
able to articulate. And the other thing that I think is helpful on this podcast, I always encourage people to take notes, right? So as you're going
Right.
through, so you said, hey, here's this sort of series of steps that if you're introspective, you'll realize. One is that working too hard, that hustle culture, right? And I find it interesting that you said, hey, you don't think that should carry a good connotation. You listen to a lot of coaches and a lot of YouTube personalities, and they're like, oh, you got to hustle, you got to have a side hustle, you got to have a double side hustle, you got to have and it's like, well, okay, I
Yep.
mean, do you like, for me, as we were talking beforehand, like I do, marketing and advertising, and this I guess would be a side hustle. I do this purely out of passion and purpose, and I love it. And so it's one of those, I think that's interesting. So number one, you said, was working too hard, like you're just giving all of yourself to whatever that thing is in front of you. Second, you said you've got that slow leak, right? You start to notice maybe missing a little bit of things, or you miss a meeting or miss a deadline, that leads to that disconnection from the place that you're at. And then you said this is my words on this, when you said when you notice you're drained, and you were saying, hey, you're working on the thing. My note that I jotted down is you're sort of working from habit. You're not working from fuel in the tank. It's just because, hey, I've done this for so many repetitions. I know how to do it. I can do it, almost to the point, like when you were saying counting in multiple languages. I'm just counting the steps that I've created in my head to do this job over the course of these number of years. So I'm working purely out of habit rather than that you've lost the hustle and it's turned to habit, so to speak, if you will. And then you said you realize when you're at that breaking point. So let me ask you, when you get to the breaking point, Samar, is it something that if I say, hey, I know I'm there, I'm at this breaking point, I'm just burnt out, I'm burnt out on this job or this place in my life or this action or this activity, or maybe it's an extracurricular thing, but you know you've hit that breaking point. What's the next step, man?
I can tell you what happens in most cases that I've come across.
Okay.
That the next step is stepping into a new thing and starting back at one. Because they still haven't, a lot of people haven't learned that the hustle was the problem. Because they start to think it's outside of themselves, right? We always think, whatever it was is the evil thing. That boss is that monster that lives at the office. They don't go home and have a family and do regular things like make a sandwich sometimes. They are an evil entity that lives in an office.
They don't have people over for dinner. They have no friends.
There is no understanding of the experience, and it comes from pain. It's perfectly natural for us to look at it two-dimensionally because we can't see it around our own pain. So then we go somewhere else where maybe the pay is a little bit more attractive or the work culture is a little bit cooler, and we start off back at one, working way too hard and giving up everything. So then we sort of train people to start to expect that from us, and we start to get surprised as we continue the same pain pattern. And to touch on the hustle culture, that side hustle, I don't want to stop anybody from doing a side hustle. I think those in some cases are feeding people's souls.
I agree with you. Yes. And I don't want anyone to take that out of context. I gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to it. What I'm talking about is not feeding your soul is the issue, not taking time away from things to do good.
Sure. So one of the things that you said here is you got to make sure, and one of the things that you realized when you were a younger man, now you're wiser,
right? Barely younger.
I feel like that every day. I was like, well, I was younger yesterday. I didn't know. You said reserve some time for yourself. And I think so often in leadership and management and entrepreneurial and business roles in general, we do get swept up with the thing. It's easy to turn passion and purpose into habitual, I owe this versus, hey, I'm driving this, right? It goes from the push to the pull, so to speak. And I think oftentimes people that are in leadership roles, they can find it difficult to reserve time for themselves. Yeah. So do you have some recommendations? Because people that are listening to the show are either managers, leaders, moving into management. Maybe they've been here for a little bit. Maybe somebody that we're speaking to today is like, man, I'm just ready to hit that wall. And do you have like one practical step, 3 practical steps? What is something that they can do to be sure that they don't hit that wall, or if they're going to hit the wall, that they're not repeating, right? It's the definition of an insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and wanting a different result. Well, this job's going to be better this time. And then it's like, okay, well, whether it's 5 years or 25 years, if you're ending up on that path and you're missing something. So what's something that maybe people could do or should do from your perspective as a coach so that they can reserve some time for themselves, so they can keep that fire lit?
Well, what this makes me think of is so there was, I forget what philosopher was out to lunch. It was Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, one of these big wigs,
Sure.
was out to lunch and saw a waiter being the perfect waiter. And he turned to his friend and said, "Look at that waiter. He thinks he is a waiter." And the example behind that is we are not our jobs, right? Even when it comes down to father, brother, sister, or manager, CEO, founder. We are not those things. We are people who do those things. So, my best habit that I've given anybody is show up for yourself first. And maybe that's waking up, and I know it's the most annoying thing every coach tends to tell people, but wake up 5 minutes earlier, and spend 5 minutes being you on whatever you want. I would suggest something like journaling. A lot of people like to think in ink. I would suggest meditating, watch a show, maybe. I mean, it's really low tier. If all you're doing is starting out, maybe watch a show. But probably try to engage your brain in some way while being you. If that means more to the point, doing like a crossword or something like that, or reading a book. These are ways that you can be you before you show up for anyone else. Because when we wake up and we are immediately father, we're immediately brother, we're immediately a CEO answering emails and checking our schedules. These are us being a thing. These aren't us being people. We have to show up for ourselves so that we stay out of that desperation almost mindset that we have to be something that we're not, that we weren't born to be, that we had to learn someday.
That is magnificently powerful. And I agree with you. I think it's interesting because you're like, hey, every coach says this. I've said it. I do stuff for myself.
Right.
But I think one of the things that we fall into, and like I said, jokingly, like each day I'm a little bit older and hopefully a little bit wiser.
Yeah.
But it's one of those that I definitely have had to learn that until you put it in that perspective, in that frame. I can even say I haven't looked at it that way. Like for myself, I will get up in the morning and the first thing is, I spend time. I don't grab my phone. I do not. That stuff will always be there. I will sit up and I will pray and I'll spend even now if it's 5 or 10 minutes, even if it's a pressing day. And I just looking at my own perspective, it's like I'm pouring into, okay, well, I'll get up earlier and go do this, connect with other men. I'm in a men's group or those sorts of
Right.
things. So I'm curious what, if somebody's looking at this, cause they look and they go, man, Samar's like, I love interviewing, people like you that seem so just centered in yourself. Like you have this humble and quiet confidence
The
about you.
suspenders.
And and so I don't think it's the suspenders, but as we sit and talk, it's like, okay, well, people from the outside perspective that may be watching or listening to this show would look and go, man, Samar's, yeah, he's got all this stuff together. So I'm curious, how do you start your day? What do you do for yourself each day when you're saying, hey, I recommend somebody does this? Maybe where are you at in your journey? What do you do, Samar? I'm curious to know.
So most days, as we spoke before the podcast started, I am a recent father of two.
Yes,
I have,
congratulations.
thank you very much. I have a 2-year-old and I have a 12-day-old. So I'm checking
12
the date
days.
here. 12 days, yes. So recently, I'm dad.
Sure.
But on a good day, on the day that I mean to be living, um, I'm waking up and I am going on to I do pick up my phone, but I go into my notes app
Okay.
and I'll go in and I'll journal a little bit. There is a journal bit on my phone, but I don't touch it because it's not as ingrained in my brain. So I go into my notes app and I'll just type up a little something. Sometimes it's an idea for a short story. Sometimes it's an idea to put into, I'm working on a couple of nonfiction books. So I'm putting that in there. And I don't know that I even included author in my bio.
You didn't. We're going to need to work on that, man.
I'm sure just like yourself, if I put everything I did, we'd never stop talking.
Right.
But yeah, I'm putting down ideas, and I'm making sure that these are things that were in my brain, and I put them down to paper, because I believe what I am more than most things is creative, and that helps me do that in the beginning of my day to sort of set me up for the day that I mean to have, because I've already gotten some ideas down. I can't possibly feel like a failure today.
I'm writing this down. So,
Yeah.
and I want other people to write it down because I think this is a great line. And you've said this a couple times. It's important for people to have the day they mean to have. It talks about being deliberate. It talks about being consistent. That's a very strong line. And so I would encourage people, and I don't know if you've coined that. I'll definitely credit you with it. Like, have the day you mean to have. Samar Kargbo, you heard it here
like
first in the Leadership Toolkit. That is, I think it's fantastic. It's, a couple things too, before we get too far. I always get a ways into this. A couple of things for the people that might be listening on the show. And certainly if you're watching, I've thrown some banners on the screen here and again, but if you are looking to connect with Samar, he does, as we talked, he does coaching, he does leadership coaching, burnout coaching, consulting. If you're wanting to connect with him, you can check out his website. It's samarthinks.com. That's SAMARTHINKS.com. And also on his site, and I love that I actually looked at your site right before we started, and it's, best time to plant a tree whenever you can. So it's like start now. Yeah. I love that. He's got a burnout blueprint PDF. There's some other services on there. And then certainly, and we haven't got into talking about this yet, but Samar has his own podcast. It's the Sort of Sure podcast, SOS podcast. You can click, and I have it on the screen here, but you go to samarthinks.com/SOS pod-player. You can check out his podcast there, where he interviews people that are sort of sure, I guess is the way you would say it. Can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and how did you come up with the name? I'd love to go into that a little bit.
So it's kind of crunchy and all that, but before those things, I had this idea, and it comes from Arthur C. Clarke. He wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in there he said, oh boy, I'm going to botch it now. It's one of my favorite quotes. He said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. As sort of almost a counterpoint, but also continuation of that, I tell people in coaching and in workshops and all sorts of things that any sufficiently advanced technique for life change, for getting through the day, for whatever, is indistinguishable from an innate ability. So I formed the Sort of Sure podcast so that people can see nobody's doing this on autopilot. Everybody has some form of imposter syndrome. The most confident person you've ever met has had imposter syndrome. They just have a habit or a skill that they've worked very hard on, either on purpose or by accident, to get them through those moments that might be hanging you up.
Sure.
So I have people on the podcast and I ask them a series of questions like this. We have a good time, but it's about 20 minutes. So it's significantly shorter than most. But I have people on and they talk about either a time in their life or a time they've experienced in a client's life or something like that. I give them that option, but they always talk about themselves, where they are just sort of up the creek. They believe they don't belong in a room that they do belong in. The core of it, imposter syndrome, is when we've done the work, but our brains, irregardless, oh boy, I use the word irregardless. completely removed from evidence, tell us that we haven't done the work.
Sure.
So we now have this sort of community growing around it. I'm 8 episodes in, and we've gotten some really powerful things out of there. I mean, people I've known personally for years telling me things I've never heard from them,
Sure.
just because we're talking in a different context. So really fun to go through and hear these things. I mean, if you could hear, I wish I'd record when I go and talk to my wife after I record one of these. I'm always so pumped.
It's funny because I do the same thing. I'll sit and you record your podcast. And I'm like, you got to hear that. And so I'm curious because you're also married with kids. Does your wife listen to all your shows?
No, she listens to
Mine
some.
doesn't either. Mine doesn't either. I'm like,
Well,
no,
when
you have to hear today's show. It was so awesome. You need to hear it. Right.
Yeah.
It's fun. So
Yeah.
interestingly, and we were talking some, I think that's a really powerful premise to have a whole show, sort of sure, because I think everybody ends up in that case. And for those that may not be super familiar, like Samar said, imposter syndrome, it's when you've been doing the thing. I started my leadership podcast, the first leadership podcast that I started back in 2018. I'd already been in leadership roles for 20 years. So if you're in front of people, like, the thing, but then once all of a sudden you put it on paper, you put it in video format, and you're speaking to people that are unknown, you start to question what you have known. That was sort of how
Right.
I set it up, that it was like, well, who am I to be talking about leadership? And it's like, I've been coaching people since the mid 90s, right? Literally,
Right.
I was coaching youth sports that moved into coaching other stuff. But then all of a sudden now it becomes sort of real and raw, and people can go back and watch it on YouTube or listen to it, or if it's, depending on what format it's published in, at some point. I do think everybody experiences some sort of imposter syndrome, that it's like, am I worthy? Should I be talking about this? Why am I okay to talk about this? Whether you have a degree, you don't have a degree, you have the experience, you don't have the experience. So I'm curious, what are some common themes that you've seen? You said you're 8 episodes in. Is there a theme or two? Is there a timeline or two? What are one or two things, maybe in this instance, that there's a common thread that has run through each episode that you go, gotcha, and that you could share with people today so that they know that that's starting to descend on them? And are you seeing anything like that?
I can say a lot of them, maybe not every single one, but a lot of the biggest reasons that people put to themselves for imposter syndrome come from
Yes.
childhood. Um,
Really?
it's us forming a belief about ourselves in a time when it kept us safe, when being small was really in our favor, and carrying it to a time when it's no longer useful, when we're adults, when taking up space and being a full-grown adult is much more useful than being small. We hold on to the small because it still makes us feel safe. So that's a
Interesting.
really big one. And then I can just say that when I get toward the end of the podcast, I ask, do you have any advice? And I can say that people rattle off as if it's a grocery list, as if it's the easiest thing in the world, the most profound, the most amazing phrases. Somebody the other day said, and this is one that's coming out maybe in a month or two.
Okay. Here's the preview.
Yeah. He said, when I asked, of course, what advice do you have? He said, go to where you're curious. Go do what makes you curious. Oh, wow. Are you kidding me? Because that's what this guy does. Whenever he feels like he doesn't belong in a room, or he doesn't feel right in a room, he says to himself, what curious about this situation? And then he focuses in on that. And I was blown away.
That's again, super powerful. It's interesting because I've heard that more and more in leadership. And one of the things that hit me, and I've never watched the whole show, but what is it, Ted Lasso or whatnot? I imagine you've seen the
I've
clips
seen
also.
every episode.
I
love
haven't
it.
seen it. I haven't seen it, but I want to, because I keep seeing these shorts come up and these clips come up, and one of them he talks about, they're playing darts, right?
Oh,
They're
yes.
playing darts, and I don't know the premise behind it, but he's, either he's out of the coaching role, or the other guy's out of the box or whatnot, and he says, he says, if people were more curious, they'd ask these questions. If people were more curious, like, did you play a lot of darts, Ted? Yeah,
Yeah,
every Sunday, yeah, and you know the clip I'm talking about, right?
absolutely.
and
Yes.
and it's like that is such a profound statement. So when you're talking about, like, hey, go to where you're curious, and that comes up, and that hits me like right in the soul, because you're right. I think we get so wrapped up in what is the leadership role, what's the next thing that I have to do, what's the next person I have to engage with, what's the next task. I think it was one of the things that occurs to me. I think it was Michael J. Fox that said this, and I've shared this on maybe another episode or two, but it hits me similar to the quote that you just shared. Like, when we're in leadership and we're in management, we're so worried about doing the next thing right. And it was Michael J. Fox, I think, in his book, that he said what we should be worrying about is what's the next right thing. And I'm like,
Yes.
man, that's a very strong deal. So, like, go to where you're curious, because that could be the next right thing for you where you're at in the moment.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. I've
so
heard that from Kristen Bell.
okay.
Oddly enough, as we've mentioned, I have a young daughter, and I watched completely without her. My wife and I watched a document about the making of Frozen 2. And Kristen
Okay.
Bell talked about where there's a song in there called The Next Right Thing. And it came from
Okay.
her experience having kids and a life and very successful career. And when you can't get out of bed, you just do the next right thing. You do one thing and then the next, and then continue on,
Next.
and you can get back to bed like that.
I love it. So let's move into one more thing. Here's another quick reminder. If people didn't join us early on, and I want to make sure and get this stuff on the screen, if you want to connect with Samar, it's Samar Kargbo, and you can check out his website. It's Samar Thinks, SamarThinks.com. So you can make sure and go there. He's got links to everything that you would want on there, his podcast and everything else. Also, if you wanted to connect, I always recommend if you want to connect with the human behind stuff. I think LinkedIn is a great way to do it for business professionals. So you go to linkedin.com/in/Samar Thinks also, and you might send him a request there. I always
I'm on
recommend when
there
I'm
every
interviewing.
day.
Yep. I always recommend when I'm talking with guests and I'm sharing with an audience, make sure and send them a message so they know why or who you're connecting with, not just the random, and make it a human message. I find myself having to respond back on LinkedIn, like, are you a real person or is this a robot? And of course they always tell me they're a real person, even when they're not, but,
Yeah.
you can connect with Samar in those ways. So I'm curious, we've talked about a couple of things that can be pretty heavy subjects, especially for people that have been on into leadership, getting burned out. You mentioned as from a young age, breaking through that, using your own experiences to help others break through that, as you've done in your coaching career. Formed a whole podcast around imposter syndrome and helping others to break through that through other people's voices as well, which is awesome. So one of the items you sent, because we exchanged very brief email, and I always want these shows and these conversations to stay very genuine and candid. You sent a simple one line was, hey, let's talk about resilience. And I think that can take on many different forms.
Yes.
When we talk about resilience, even going back to your Kristen Bell thing of, hey, just do the next right thing, get out of bed, do this, do what's next, the next right thing, and then the next right thing. So let me frame this up for you a little bit. Can you expand on, when you're talking about resilience, what is resilience to you? And are you talking about it in a family setting, in a business setting? Is there a global view of what resilience is for folks?
Maybe not for many, but for me, I see it as a global view. I think
Okay.
resilience is a skill that we learn, and then it's applicable in every arena. So this goes to actually a book that I'm currently editing, and I wrote it many years ago. And now I'm visiting, and hopefully it'll be out in a couple of months.
Good.
But it's the idea behind it is that very seldom do we get the chance to stick the landing when it comes to, a fall emotionally. So I separated out the severity of getting an emotional hit. So I said if you get a small hit that's like stubbing your toe sidewalk, you're not physically hurt. It's just embarrassing.
Sure.
That sort of hits part of you I call the guardian, which is something that retraining but isn't quite you. It's the persona you put out. And then if something's a little bit more significant, then it'll hit, say, what I call the navigator. So navigator is the part of you that says, we'll call this a breakup. This is something that isn't great. You've been dating for maybe 3 months, something short, but it's a hit to the ego. And your guardian can't help you there anymore. And you're gonna have that very real fall the first time it happens, but you can recover. And once it hits your navigator, how do we recover? How do we recover that bit of our ego without overinflating it? And then something a little bit more intense. Let's say it hits this part I call the creature, the center of us, the core of us, where we keep our wanting to eat, drink water, shelter, our need, very basic things. When something hits there and that part goes a little bit offline, this is why it doesn't have to be a bad thing. When there's a birth and when there's a death, you feed people, right? You gather around them, you're never alone, and you're getting food constantly. These sorts of experiences are when the creature is sort of hit and is recovering. And we need to be able to recover. But what we can rely on there, you can't rely on yourself anymore once you get that deep. Then
Gotcha.
you have to have cultivated the you in other people, the sort of guardian that other people keep for you. So what I say there is have a community around yourself. And that is, I know in our Western sort of society, we've decided that we don't need other people. We don't need to get some help from somebody because I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps, right? When I'm having a hard time, I'll be alone. And that's when we get, I'm by nature, I know people tend not to admit this, but I'm a depressive. And so I have had numerous times in my life where others have come around me. They've made sure I wasn't alone. They've made sure that I had everything I needed. They fed me like crazy and they got me through it and very likely saved my life. So being that person in all of those scenarios has equipped me perhaps uniquely to speak on this and say that we can't live either in any of these parts of our psyche alone, but also by ourselves. Because resilience isn't just being able to recover. Resilience is having systems in place to recover well.
I love that last line. Can you repeat that? You said resilience is not, or
Not well, if I can say
not
it
just,
exactly, but
okay,
not just our ability to recover, but having systems in place so that we can recover well.
got it. Yeah, no, I think that's excellent. And I love the breakdown of it. I love at the very beginning the fact that, I frame up a question, we're talking about resilience, and you're like, the very first thing that you said is resilience is a skill, which means for anybody out there, it can be learned. We can teach skills.
Absolutely.
So man, that for me, that's like this is silly, but I got goosebumps saying that because I think it's so
Yeah.
freaking awesome that I think so often we look at somebody and we look at their characteristics and we go, oh, well, they're just really resilient. Well, what did they have to go through to get there? Right. And so you got to take note of that, folks, is resilience is a skill. It can be learned and it can be taught. So you can either help someone on the path, or if you're somebody that takes those hits pretty hard, then maybe find somebody that's accomplish that, like Samar, and learn that. And then I love the breakdown, sort of the guardian. I took that as the protector. It's that you said that protective outer shell, right? The navigator, we're getting hit harder, the core part. It's interesting when you said it's the when you get down to that bottom layer, that deepest part, it's finding the you in others was your statement. And it's really having strong community. It's interesting because I'm going through, my wife and I are going through sort of our double date night. We do a Bible study together. And it's one of those pieces that it's, we've found some community there of people that really are like, they're in our wheelhouse. And so they look at us through that clean slate. Like they don't have any preconceived notions of who we used to be. They just know who we are now. And so they wrap their arms around us. And so finding the you and others and having that really deep community is a super powerful statement, man. Really is.
Yeah.
Really is. So thank you.
Well, it is everything. And I love that, that you said they wrap their arms around us, because having that soft place to land in community is the best.
It absolutely is. So we're coming to the tail end here. We're a couple of things as a reminder for everybody. If you did not see this earlier, I'll throw each of these on the screen, but you can connect with Samar on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/n/Samar Thinks. It's SamarThinks. So you can look him up on LinkedIn that way. He said he's on there every day. So I encourage you to reach out and connect. Also his website, same spelling, samarthinks.com. And if you get into the website, he's got some great tools and resources there. You can sign up, looks like, for his newsletter. He's got a burnout blueprint PDF. Can't speak sometimes, but that was something we talked about early on. So I definitely, it certainly has expertise on that. I would dive in there. And then if you want to check out his show, it's the Sort of Sure podcast. So you can get there through his website or just about anywhere podcasts are listened to, right? You said you're on every platform that you know of.
Yep, every single one I could find.
So also people that may have seen it, we were talking before, you're the founder of, because it's listed on your website, Dexterous. It's Dexter, then second word RES, Dexterous. So if you see that on his website, that was the initial business venture for you, right, Samar?
Yes, and so it wasn't just its thing, right? I was very pretentious in high school, and I took Latin, and Dexterous is sort of like pig Latin. It's not exact how they would say it, but Dexter is right, as in the right hand, and res is thing. So
is what you cut out right there?
Oh, it's just thing. So
gotcha. So it's the right thing.
Yeah, it's the right thing. And I made them 2 words, and I made it confusing. So that's my life.
so as we come to the tail end, any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we sign off today?
Yes, just quickly. So as quickly as I can. I live my life by 3 major ideals. I won't go into all of them. It's really just this last one, but decency, which I think speaks for itself. Legacy. Again, same thing, and agency. Now that's the one that I want to talk about, because you mentioned a little bit early that you got goosebumps when you were talking about a skill, about being able to learn a skill, and that is, I don't think it's unique to me to have agency is one of the main things that you want to focus on in life. But the reason I love it is because personal agency can change the world. If we are able to enact our agency in more situations, sort of throw the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt out the window and just focus on the fact that there are very, very, very few situations where we don't have personal agency. And generally, if we don't, someone's committing a crime. But we have personal agency, and when we can enact that and give ourselves a chance to be us in that situation, we can either change the world for us or for someone that matters a great deal to us. And just showing up kind of in the same way as the first few minutes of your day, showing up for ourselves can be the deciding factor between us living the life that we choose and us living the life that we just got 6 months ago.
Man, very, very strong. I love it. So, ladies and gentlemen, Samar Kargbo, thank you for joining me on the Leadership Toolkit today. If you would do me a favor, just hang tight for a minute and I will take us out. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit with my new friend, Samar Kargbo. I encourage you, check out his website, check out the Burnout Blueprint, check out the Sort of Sure podcast. He's one of those people, like I said, he has that genuine, just sure confidence about himself. And listening to him speak, I'm really excited for where his podcast takes off to. So I would encourage you to tune in and check that out. For anybody that is tuned in and listening, also, one of the best things that you can do, please do me a favor and throw some thumbs up on the episode, throw some comments, throw some likes, whatever platform it is that you're watching or listening on. I would sure appreciate that. That's one of the ways that the podcast grows. But most importantly, if you know somebody that would gain benefit from listening to this episode, share it with them. That's what we're here to do. And we're talking about, hey, here's a way to impact just one person. And you say, well, that may not, we're not here to impact the world, but we're here to impact their world. So share this with somebody that would gain benefit from it. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining me on the Leadership Toolkit today. Till we speak next, stay great. We'll talk soon, everyone.